Carrie Ann Jopek was born on August 17, 1968, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Carolyn and Robert Jopek. However, her parents' marriage was short-lived, and they divorced when Carrie was still young. Her mother, Carolyn, subsequently remarried Frederick Toussaint, also known as Fred. Carrie, her mother, stepfather, and younger sister Maggie resided together in Cudahy, a suburb of Milwaukee. While details about Carrie's childhood are scarce, her family's accounts suggest a nurturing environment and a happy upbringing. Carrie was reportedly an outgoing and kind individual, making her a desirable friend. As she entered her early teens, tensions arose between Carrie and her stepfather, Fred, fueled by her assertive nature. Their disagreements often escalated into arguments, with Carrie declaring, "You're not my dad." Her family characterized her as strong-willed, indicating a desire to assert her independence and get her way. When things didn't go as planned, Carrie's combative side emerged, typical of a bratty teenager. In March 1982, 13-year-old Carrie Ann Jopek attended school, following a sleepover with a friend. After walking to school together, they parted ways to attend their respective classes. The two friends reunited at lunchtime, where Carrie expressed frustration. Earlier that day, a classmate had thrown paint on her shirt, prompting her to retaliate physically, leading to her suspension. Carrie was anxious about going home, fearing her stepfather Fred's reaction to the suspension and altercation. Alternatively, some reports suggested Carrie's suspension resulted from being seen walking in the hallway, assumed to be skipping class. Regardless of the reason, school officials notified Carrie's mother, Carolyn, who opted to let Carrie walk home due to the proximity, approximately 3 minutes, and the trusting nature of their Milwaukee community in the 1980s. With the decision made, Carrie embarked on the short walk home, unaware of the tragic events that would soon unfold. In this close-knit community, where everyone was familiar with one another, Carolyn awaited Carrie's return home. When Carrie failed to appear, Carolyn's initial concern was tempered by her tendency to grant Carrie independence, thinking she might have stopped by a friend's house. However, as hours passed and darkness fell, Carolyn's worry grew. She visited Carrie's best friend, Robin, who lived nearby, but Carrie was nowhere to be found. Carolyn then contacted the girl who had hosted the sleepover, but she hadn't seen or heard from Carrie since her suspension at lunchtime. Carolyn's search expanded to the entire neighborhood, inquiring with anyone she could find, but no one had any information about Carrie's whereabouts. By 11 p.m., Carolyn had mobilized a search party comprising neighbors, friends, and family, scouring the surrounding streets, but their efforts yielded nothing. The following day, March 17th, Carolyn filed a missing persons report, prompting an immediate police investigation. Authorities began questioning neighbors, friends, family, and school acquaintances, but Carrie remained unaccounted for. Initially, the police suspected that Carrie might have run away, which Carolyn found dismissive and unlikely. Despite her insistence that Carrie wouldn't run away, the police seemed unconcerned, citing the high number of runaways. As the investigation began, everyone tried to remain optimistic, given that less than 24 hours had passed since Carrie's disappearance. One potential lead was Carrie's father, Robert, who also lived in Milwaukee, but he had a solid alibi, having been at work the previous day, and hadn't heard from Carrie. Although the police initially leaned towards the runaway theory, they also explored the possibility of abduction, preparing for the worst due to Carrie's young age and the complete lack of information about her disappearance. One of the early suspects was John Mant, the 17-year-old brother of Carrie's best friend, Robin, who lived across the road from Carrie's family. John had a criminal record, including petty theft and drug dealing, which caught the police's attention. His history and proximity to Carrie's home made him a person of interest in the investigation. The police's suspicion of John Mant was further fueled by reports of his romantic advances towards Carrie, leading to his questioning. However, he denied any involvement in her disappearance and claimed to have no knowledge of her whereabouts. Without concrete evidence, the police were forced to release him. Another lead investigated by the police was sparked by a tip regarding Carrie's stepfather, Fred, and a newly laid concrete slab in their backyard. The tip suggested that Fred might have buried Carrie's body under the slab, prompting the police to explore this possibility. Although there was no evidence to suggest a motive for Fred to harm Carrie, aside from their typical teenage disagreements, the police thoroughly investigated this lead. They employed ground-penetrating radar to scan the slab, but found nothing, ruling out this theory. The police were leaving no stone unturned in their quest to find Carrie, exploring every possible avenue to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. As time passed with little progress in the case, Carrie's family organized a public appeal, urging anyone with information to come forward. This effort generated several reported sightings of Carrie, including one by her mother, Carolyn, but none could be confirmed. As hope dwindled, frustrations mounted, and the case eventually went cold. Over a year later, on September 2nd, 1983, a contractor was hired to demolish the back porch and level the soil at the Mant family home, where Carrie's best friend Robin and her brother John lived. While excavating, the contractor encountered a strong odor and eventually uncovered human remains beneath a few inches of soil. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, with emergency services rushing to the scene. The neighborhood was left reeling in disbelief, as no one expected such a tragic outcome in their tight-knit community. The discovery of human remains at the Mant family home sparked widespread speculation that the body was Carrie's, given the proximity to her house and the fact that it was found at her best friend's residence. Onlookers murmured among themselves, many convinced that John was responsible due to the location of the remains and his visible distress, vomiting upon their extraction. Carrie's mother, Carolyn, was summoned to identify the remains and confirmed they belonged to her daughter by recognizing a jacket buried with the body. The heartbreaking revelation left the family with unanswered questions about the circumstances surrounding Carrie's murder. Following the discovery, John was re-questioned by authorities, but denied involvement and requested legal counsel. Without concrete evidence, he was released. The autopsy report later revealed Carrie's probable cause of death as intracranial hemorrhaging resulting from lacerations to her left vertebral artery and a C1 vertebra fracture, indicating she died from bleeding inside her skull due to head and neck injuries. The investigation continued, seeking answers to who buried Carrie and why. Around the time of Carrie's remains discovery, rumors emerged about a party held at the Mant family home on the night of her disappearance. Allegedly, John Mant hosted the gathering while his mother was away. However, the party's existence became a point of contention, with some confirming and others denying it. Lacking concrete evidence beyond hearsay, the police remained undecided. 4 days after Carrie's remains were found, a neighbor came forward with a significant lead. They reported seeing 16-year-old Jose Ferreira, also known as Junior, near the excavation site where Carrie's remains were discovered. Jose was allegedly crying, screaming, and uttering apologies, saying, "I'm so sorry, Carrie." While not conclusive evidence, this behavior raised suspicions. Notably, Jose lived just 2 houses away from the Mants, in close proximity to Carrie's residence. Following this tip, the police brought Jose in for questioning, exploring a potential new lead in the investigation. The neighbor's account introduced Jose as a person of interest, warranting further scrutiny. However, he denied his involvement in the crime. Also, John Mant denied any involvement in Carrie's death, attributing his emotional reaction at the remains site to his familiarity with Carrie and distress over the situation. He also refuted the existence of a party, leaving authorities without evidence to hold him. As a result, John was released, and the investigation returned to square one. In an unexpected turn, John became close with Carrie's family, regularly attending family gatherings, sharing meals, and grieving with them. They described him as a friendly young man, and a bond formed between them. However, years passed without new leads or progress in the case. The Mant family eventually moved away, leaving Carrie's family in limbo, searching for answers about their daughter's disappearance and murder. The case remained cold until 2015, 33 years after Carrie's disappearance, when a call to a local news station finally brought new information to light, offering a glimmer of hope for the family's long-awaited answers. On October 11th at 7 a.m., a news journalist received a startling call from Jose Ferreira, who declared, "I want to confess to a murder." Jose also contacted a crisis hotline counselor and his estranged wife, confessing to the same crime, the murder of 13-year-old Carrie Ann Jopek. In his conversation with the counselor, Jose expressed uncertainty about how he wanted to proceed, mentioning either a dramatic finale or a quiet resolution, but desired media attention for the crime. The recipients of Jose's confessions, the journalist, counselor, and estranged wife, promptly notified the authorities. While the journalist and counselor alerted the police via phone, Jose's estranged wife visited the West Milwaukee police station in person to report her soon-to-be ex-husband's shocking admission. At 50 years old, Jose's confession revived the long-dormant case. Police were compelled to revisit the files and verify the details of Jose's confession, re-examining the evidence to confirm his involvement in Carrie's murder. The sudden breakthrough resurrected hopes of closure for Carrie's family, who had waited decades for answers. On October 13th, Jose Ferreira contacted authorities again to confess to the crimes. During police questioning, he reiterated his confession, leading to charges of second-degree murder. Jose's account of the events on March 16, 1982, revealed that Carrie, after being suspended from school, encountered a large party hosted by John Mant at the Mant family home while walking home. This confirmed the long-rumored party, which had remained unverified for 33 years. The motivations behind Jose's delayed confession are unclear, but it's speculated that he hoped to persuade his estranged wife to halt divorce proceedings. Additionally, Jose claimed that Carrie's spirit had been haunting him, refusing to let him be, which likely contributed to his decision to confess. This statement was even shared with Carrie's mother, Carolyn, adding a sense of closure to the case. On the night of the party, Carrie entered the house and interacted with Jose, who was 16 at the time. When she asked him for alcohol, he offered her a joint instead, which she accepted. Later, Jose suggested they go to the basement to make out, and Carrie initially agreed. However, she changed her mind at the top of the stairs, prompting Jose to become angry and push her down the stairs with considerable force. This resulted in fatal injuries, including a snapped neck and head trauma. Jose claimed he thought Carrie was unconscious and began fondling her breasts, only realizing she wasn't breathing during the assault. Panicked, he considered leaving her body but decided to move it, due to the risk of being implicated by partygoers who had seen them together. Jose characterized the events as an accident, despite his actions leading to Carrie's death and subsequent sexual assault. To avoid being identified as the last person with Carrie, Jose hid her body. Familiar with the Mant house, he dragged her lifeless body through the basement to the outside and buried her, where she was discovered years later. During questioning, Jose claimed sole responsibility for the crime, which aligned with the lack of evidence suggesting others were involved. Facing a second-degree murder charge with a 20-year sentence, Jose's attorney advised him to plead not guilty, framing the event as an accident. Initially, Jose pled not guilty and was held on $200,000 bail. At his hearing, his attorney attempted to shift blame to John Mant, presenting testimony from Robin's ex-boyfriend that Robin had allegedly confessed John's involvement. However, Robin denied this claim. The defense strategy aimed to create doubt, but the prosecution relied on Jose's confession and the circumstances of Carrie's death. As the case progressed, the court would weigh the evidence and testimony to determine Jose's fate and bring closure to Carrie's family. Despite Jose's confession, the district attorney offered a plea deal due to the 33-year delay and lack of concrete evidence beyond circumstance. In March 2017, Jose accepted the deal, pleading guilty to sexual assault and false imprisonment, and received a 7-year sentence. This conclusion came 35 years after Carrie's disappearance. At the sentencing, Jose apologized to Carrie's family, but her mother, Carolyn, expressed skepticism about his remorse. Interestingly, the medical examiner suggested that Carrie's neck injuries might have been caused by a heavy object rather than a fall, leaving room for speculation about the true events. As of 2022, Jose has been released from prison and is living in Glendale, Wisconsin, as a registered sex offender under community supervision. The case has reached a sense of closure, but some questions and doubts still linger. In 1972, Naperville, a Chicago suburb with a population of approximately 22,000, was home to the Hansen family. Jerome and Marguerite Hansen, parents of 3, resided in this quiet neighborhood with their children, 18-years-old Jill, 15-years-old Julie, and 12-years-old Mark. On the evening of July 7, 1972, Jerome and Marguerite left for the night, leaving the children at home. At around 7 p.m., Julie borrowed her brother's bike and departed, but failed to return home that night. Her siblings, Jill and Mark, initially assumed she was staying with a friend, but by the afternoon of July 8th, they grew concerned when Julie didn't come home or contact them. Upon realizing that none of Julie's friends or family had seen her since the previous day, Jill reported Julie missing that afternoon. The police launched a search of the neighborhood and discovered Julie's bike in a ditch approximately 2 miles from the Hansen residence. Tragically, about 100 yards from the bike, in a nearby cornfield, they found the lifeless body of 15-year-old Julie Hansen. An examination of the scene revealed that Julie was fully clothed and had suffered multiple stab wounds, totaling 36, to her back, neck, and chest. Additionally, evidence indicated that she had been sexually assaulted. Despite initial efforts, the police were unable to identify any suspects in the weeks and months following the murder, and the case eventually went cold. In 2019, authorities sought to re-examine the DNA evidence from the crime scene, but unfortunately, it had deteriorated significantly and was compromised by bacterial contamination. To overcome this obstacle, they enlisted the services of a specialized company to create a usable DNA profile. Fortunately, the specialized company successfully generated a DNA profile, which was then entered into the FBI's combined DNA index system. Although no immediate match was found, the police pursued a new lead in 2020 using genetic genealogy. This approach led them to revisit the January 1976 murder of 16-year-old Pamela Maurer, which had been solved. Pamela was abducted, raped, and strangled while walking to a fast food restaurant in Woodridge, Illinois, just 6 miles from Naperville. The perpetrator, Bruce Lindahl, was identified as the killer. Notably, Lindahl had also committed another violent crime in Naperville, fatally stabbing 18-year-old Charles Huber 28 times in April 1981. During this attack, Lindahl accidentally severed his own femoral artery, resulting in his death from blood loss in Huber's apartment. Following the identification of Bruce Lindahl as Pamela Maurer's killer, authorities considered him a potential suspect in Julie Hansen's murder due to his age and proximity to the crime scene at the time. However, a DNA comparison ruled out Lindahl as a match. Undeterred, the police employed genetic genealogy, the same technique that solved Pamela's case, to pursue new leads. This approach ultimately led to the arrest of 76-year-old Barry Lee Welpley on June 2, 2021, nearly 49 years after Julie's murder. Welpley, who was 27 at the time of the crime, resided less than a mile from the Hansen family. Details about Welpley's life are scarce. He worked as a welder before retiring and had lived in his current neighborhood in Mounds View, Minnesota, for 17 years, maintaining a low profile with infrequent interactions with his neighbors. Barry Lee Welpley's personal life remains somewhat of a mystery. Some neighbors speculated that he may have lived with a woman at one point, as they occasionally saw a woman tending to his garden, but her identity and whereabouts are unknown. Welpley was described as reclusive, with one neighbor recalling only a single conversation with him in 17 years, and another family stating they hadn't seen him at all during their 5-year residency on the same street. Authorities have not publicly disclosed whether Welpley has a prior criminal record. He was being held in jail with a $10 million bond, awaiting a court date that has yet to be scheduled. However, 2 years after his arrest, Barry Lee Welpley was found unresponsive early Friday on February 9, 2024, in his cell at the Will County Jail in Joliet. He was transported to a Joliet hospital where he was pronounced dead. The police are actively investigating whether Welpley may have been responsible for additional murders beyond the alleged killing of Julie Hansen. In May of 1974, the Connecticut State Police were alerted to 2 murders that took place at a residence on Shoeville Road in Ledyard, Connecticut. After conducting a search of the property and its surroundings, investigators discovered the decomposed remains of a man and a woman buried in shallow graves located a few hundred feet behind the house. The man was later identified as Gustavus Lee Carmichael, a convicted serial bank robber who had previously escaped from custody. Carmichael had a history of committing bank robberies across the country and was apprehended in 1970 for stealing $60,000 from a bank in New Jersey. Over the course of his life, he had been convicted of various crimes including burglary, kidnapping, attempted burglary, grand larceny, assault and battery, and armed robbery. Following his escape from a Massachusetts jail while being transferred to federal court in Hartford, Connecticut in October 1970, Carmichael went on the run and met the woman who would later be known as Lorraine Stahl. They assumed the identities of Dirk and Lorraine Stahl and sought refuge at the residence of Richard DeFreitas and Donald Brandt, who were also involved in criminal activities. DeFreitas and Brandt had safe houses where fugitives could hide from law enforcement. However, when Lorraine Stahl expressed her concerns about their lifestyle to DeFreitas' wife, DeFreitas and Brandt decided to eliminate Carmichael and the woman to prevent any potential exposure of their illegal operations. Fearing Carmichael's intervention if they targeted only the woman, they chose to kill both of them. Investigators believed that Carmichael and the woman were murdered on December 31, 1970, 4 years prior to the discovery of their bodies. DeFreitas and Brandt shot and killed Carmichael and the woman before disposing of their bodies, which remained undiscovered for over 3 years. Richard DeFreitas and Donald Brandt were eventually convicted of the murders and have since passed away. While the man was identified, the woman remained unknown as she had used an alias that was never confirmed. Prior to adopting the name Lorraine Stahl, she went by the names Connie and Sandy, and was often seen driving a 1964 green Oldsmobile with either Massachusetts or Maine plates. The vehicle was later discovered abandoned in Hartford with a Maine registration sticker on the license plate. It was believed that she may have worked in New York City. Following the discovery of the bodies, authorities found clothing and jewelry with the woman's remains, including a tan leather wet look vest, a gold or tan sweater, a brown tweed skirt, and a pair of brown granny boots. She was also wearing a pendant and rings, as per state police reports. A class ring found had the letters JHSN monogrammed, the initials ILN, and the date 1917 engraved inside. Despite being unidentified for 5 decades, her case details were entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System in 2011 and the Combined DNA Index System in 2012, yet she remained nameless. However, in 2022, DNA samples were sent to Othram Labs, who successfully created a DNA profile of the victim. By January 2024, the results led to a connection with the victim's sister. It was also discovered that the victim had a daughter who provided a DNA sample, ultimately leading to the identification of Lorraine Stahl as Linda Sue Childers. Childers, born on September 4, 1946, originally hailed from Louisville, Kentucky. Her sister and daughter were informed of her identification, marking the resolution of a case that had remained unsolved for over half a century.